Now you're all set.
Okay. So seeing the presence of a quorum, I will call to order this meeting of the Pelham School Committee on Wednesday, November 17th at 6:30 p.m. I'm Margaret Stancer. I'll be chairing the meeting tonight in the absence of our chair, Sarah Hall. I will take a roll call vote. So just respond present. Sarah Bess.
Penny present.
Brenda.
Barlow present.
Ron.
Present.
And Margaret present. Our first order of business will be approval of the minutes, and there are 3 sets of minutes to go through today. Mike, will you share them for us? We'll start with one that's way back from the summer. I think it, right. So, would someone like to make a motion to approve the minutes? And then we'll go into corrections and changes. And I can't see anybody.
I can't.
And yeah. Oh, that's good. Okay. So I move that we accept the minutes of Thursday, July 1st. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ron. So any corrections or changes to the minutes? Wow. Great. Seeing none, we'll take a vote. Sarah Bess.
Kenny, aye.
Ron.
Menino, aye.
Brenda.
Barlow, aye.
And Stancer, aye. The minutes are approved. 4 ayes and 0 nays. All right. So the second set of minutes. Okay. I move that we accept the minutes of Wednesday, September 15th. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Are there comments, changes, corrections? Sarah Beth.
I have just 2 really quick ones. They're just spelling. So in section B under reports, it's listed as the BRIGHT program, but it's BRIGHT, but I believe it's BRIGHT, BRYT, their initials. And then, so I think that just needs a little updating. And then in section G, there is under the gifts, Mr. Laurie's name is LAWRIE.
Thank you. Anyone else have corrections? No? Okay, then we'll proceed to a vote. Sarah Bess.
Kenny, aye.
Ron.
Menino, aye.
Brenda.
Barlow, aye.
And Stancer, aye. Those minutes are approved. And then we'll move on to the minutes from our last meeting, which was Wednesday, October 20th. I move to accept the minutes of Wednesday, October 20th. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. It's open for changes, corrections, additions. Dr. Morris.
Just a spelling one, and I think I've spelled it wrong, so this is no knock on you, Maylene, but ESSER is ESSER, so it's a 5-letter acronym. There's an E before the R at the end of ESSER, but I've made that mistake many a time, and I know you've copied my documents that had that mistake, but I think we should have the corrected language or corrected acronym on there.
Okay. Anyone else? See no other corrections or changes, we'll take a vote. Ms. Kenny.
Kenny, aye.
Mr. Menino.
Menino, aye.
Ms. Barlow.
Barlow, aye.
And Stancer, aye. All right. We have no public comment tonight, So we will move on to the superintendent's update.
Sure. And I'll be brief. Couple things that have been going on. We've had pool testing started across all the schools in all 3 districts. And so that's gone smoothly, and obviously took a long time to get going, longer than we'd like, but that's been a good thing. And so far, all of our pools have come up negative at all of our schools. I can't guarantee
Wow.
that'll continue. I actually find it mathematically unlikely that that'll continue in all of our schools, but so far so good with that, and appreciate the vendor and the nurses and Nurse Katie and all the work that's gone into getting that off the ground. So that's been a good thing. I think what we've seen is, since we had those 2 early cases in Pelham, things settle in Pelham. But, as the cases go up across the state and in our region, it's likely that we'll see more cases in our schools. And we're already starting to see that in some of my other districts. So, I think we are reflective of the case counts in the larger community. I think the important note is in all of our schools, including Pelham, we have no evidence of school-based spread. In other words, when the contact tracing occurs, the point of contact where the COVID is thought to have spread is generally in the home or in social situations outside of school. And that makes me feel really good about the measures we're taking to keep students safe. It's not that we can prevent anyone from catching COVID, or we can guarantee that there will never be school spread. But at this point, across our 3 districts, we're over 20 cases. We have a fair number of close contacts, and no one's tested positive. So I think there's evidence that the strategies we're using around ventilation, masking, now we've added the testing piece and distancing have been effective. Compliment the Pelham staff. They're doing a great job, even in the chilly weather we're starting to have of getting kids outside and eating outside and taking a lot of measures to keep our schools safe. The third thing I want to mention is I had, try to go in order. I'll stay on health and safety. I know we'll talk about vaccine stuff later, so I will get there shortly. But I think we've really had a lot of support, and I really do want to thank. I know I mentioned Nurse Katie before, but there was a good article in the New York Times the other day about this. The nurses in schools have held on to a lot of people's anxiety throughout the school year in all schools. And I just want to publicly thank Nurse Katie. And there's a lot of people who had lots of concerns and continue to have lots of concerns about what in-person schooling looks like mid-pandemic. And, that's a lot. It's a lot to carry. We tried to celebrate our nurses earlier in the year, but I don't think I can say enough how important her support of Pelham School has been and how critical it is that, especially at a small school like Pelham, where everybody knows everyone, that we have that ongoing support from the nursing staff at Pelham. So I want to really, thank her for that. I think the last thing I want to mention before I turn it over to Mickey is I was able to be up at Pelham with Mickey today and just got in a couple classrooms. And what I was kind of sharing with Mickey is just how engaged the kids are. Yes, they're sitting further apart. Yes, they're wearing masks. But the learning that's happening and the instruction has maintained kind of the hallmark of Pelham, which is, small school and high level of engagement and community. And that's become harder to do given the restrictions, the understandable COVID-related restrictions we have. So just compliments to the staff for stepping up in that regard, because it's not easy. I was on a superintendent conference call today of superintendents in Western Mass. And, one of the things we were talking about is it's not just the teaching, it's that, coming into work in any workplace now is a lot more isolating than it was pre-COVID. There's not the casual conversations because we are being very careful, and we do have protocols around sort of break room areas. And that's a real challenge. And I think the staff has maintained that level of connection and community despite those challenges. And I think the last thing I'll say, and I said this last night at the Amherst School Committee, is I am starting to hear considerable feedback that come January that I think a lot of the restrictions, at least on the state level, are likely to be relaxed. And, from what I understand, there was a desire to wait till the 5+ vaccine was available and accessible before some of the state restrictions would be removed, because there's such a large group of students, a large group of people in the Commonwealth. But when we get to January, everyone over the age of, or everyone 5 and up will have had the opportunity, if those so chose, to be vaccinated. What that'll mean locally, we don't know. I do talk to the Board of Health regularly. We are not going to be the first district around here to demask. That I can guarantee you right now. We're not in a rush, but I do think at some point, as we go through this academic year, we are going to need to start talking about relaxing some of those restrictions. I'm not, a lot of people have made up a lot of kind of myths about the dangers of masking for kids that I don't subscribe to or ascribe to. And it's really hard to learn how to read, when you can't see someone's mouth in the same way. And, being able to hear over an air purifier while students are wearing masks is a real challenge. I think people are overcoming those. But at the same time, I think, we get to January and February, I'm not interested in going quickly in terms of reducing or removing the COVID-related restrictions, but I am interested in start having those conversations with the committee and the community about a direction we want to go, because we're not going to be wearing masks forever. We're not going to be doing all of these kind of restrictions forever. There is a real cost to them. So, all that to preview that you may hear things at the state level. There will be no changes at Pelham until we've had a public conversation about them. So whatever happens at DESE, we'll essentially just punt to local control, and we are the local control. So we will come back to that. So I don't want to get ahead of myself, but the more and more indications I'm hearing, we may be seeing some at the state level and at some municipal levels, not necessarily the town of Pelham, but towns around here, some relaxation of some of the COVID restrictions that have been in place a very long time. And so, I'll talk about vaccines a bit later at the 5 to 11-year-old group, but I do think we're going to see some movement over the next few months at the state level. And that is my update. And certainly if there's questions, I'm happy to take them before we go on to Principal Darling.
Mr. Menino?
Regarding the masks, I'm just curious, have teachers found it more difficult to read the emotions that kids are going through when they just use their eyes or not? I'm not sure if I'm making myself clear, but if a kid's unhappy or happy, can they still detect it?
Yeah, I think, and I'd be curious, Principal Darling can jump in a second. I think, like a lot of things, I think it is more challenging. I don't think it's been impossible to detect emotion, but when you can't read the body language from the nose down, that affects how much you're able to pick up on nonverbal body language. It also, what I find is it just, even for kids and adults, it sort of flattens my face, right? If I know no one can see my mouth, right? I sort of, when I'm wearing a mask, I don't show as much, and that probably shows for the rest of my face as well. So, I don't know if it's been, I wouldn't say that we're not able to, we as educators are not able to read students' body language and emotions, but I think it has added an additional challenge and wrinkle. I don't know if you would agree with that, Ms. Darling.
I would agree. I think it's harder for the kids to read each other, especially since they have less experience and find it harder to read eyes. They can, I tend to smile really big so they can see that my eyes are squinching up, and I don't know if that's a real word, but it's harder for the kids to read other kids.
Any other questions? I actually do have a question about the pool testing. Do you know approximate percentage of students that are doing the pool testing?
Yeah, so I'd be curious if Ms. Darling can do Pelham specific across all 3 districts. It keeps on rising. Like every week, there's a couple more. I think we started; it was about a third, and across the 3 districts, I think we're up to, in the neighborhood of 50%, maybe a little bit more. I don't know if that matches Pelham's numbers, because I get the sort of combined consolidated multiple district numbers. Ms. Darling, do you have a sense of what you would estimate?
I don't actually know. If I had to guess, I would say 40%.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So if there aren't any more questions, we'll move on to the principal's update. Ms. Darling.
Okay. So I would agree with a lot of what Mike was saying about the students being engaged and walking around and seeing a lot of really wonderful stuff. I can give you like a few updates in some of the classrooms. The kindergartners are so adorable. They are learning some really hard lessons about, we do weekly pause prizes, and one little friend won a prize probably the first week. And ever since then, when am I going to win another prize? And the tears start flowing. So some hard lessons along with some really, great lessons. The first grade was learning about Diwali, the religious holiday a couple of weeks ago. Third grade they were really engaged in writing spooky stories. I've never seen, like, I walked in, I was like, what's happening? Everyone was really engaged in that. We walked into a fourth grade science unit on mudslides, and Miss Gear was asking the students what could people do to prevent mudslides. And one student said, I think we should get a giant fan to blow away the clouds so the rain wouldn't come. So, I mean, they could come up with a real possibility. So it's really exciting. We did the student council voting, and grades 4 through 6, 2 representatives from each class got voted in, and anyone who ran is kind of the next level down, and I forget what they're calling them, but everyone is included. But we do have 2 from each class as the official representatives, and it was fun to see them campaign, and they did speeches outside. I think in general, the students appear to be adjusting more to being back in person and are figuring out how to be with each other socially. And that's really great. That's not to say that, everything is going smoothly. There's the normal stuff that comes up. The fourth grade is piloting a new social emotional curriculum. And because they piloted that curriculum, we were able to get it for free for the whole year for the whole school. So that's exciting. And Jess Nardizzi, our counselor, said it's one of the best that she's seen. So we're excited about that. We've started a bunch of committees. We brought the committees back. We have a school culture committee that's working on primarily the staff and helping the staff during this really challenging time. I have seen that staff are really, I will call it more stressed than normal. And this committee is looking at ways to help and make sure they feel appreciated. We have a social justice committee that some parents signed up to join, and that's really exciting. And a SILT committee, which is basically an instructional leadership committee. And so we're looking at the data from the MCAS and also just the district beginning of year, middle of year, and end of year that we have done for as long as I've been in the district, and looking at trends and trying to figure out how we can help to, if we notice that, fractions are something that the students are struggling with, we're looking closely at those little little sections, and we're going to do some research on how to help in those areas. As I've mentioned, Bright is continuously working with us. We had them for one of our staff meetings last week, and that was really great. We're having the turkey trot this Friday. Very exciting. Bringing it back. I actually have never been at Pelham for the turkey trot, so I'm super excited. It's a mile, run, walk, skip, dance, whatever you want to do. The staff are going to be out there, all the students. Mostly, we're not going to make anyone who doesn't want to participate, but it's going to be outside and come around back to the school. And there might be a teacher dressed up like a turkey. I don't know, maybe it will happen. Intervention is showing amazing progress. So our intervention teacher has been sharing with all the classroom teachers and with parents the unbelievable progress in such a short amount of time. So that's really exciting for us. The trunk or treat was a success. The haunted house was amazing. I was spooked. I really was. I was nervous walking through, and the kids seemed to have just as much fun if it were sunny and not pouring rain. Even the parents looked okay. And I would say that's really it. I mean, there's a lot going on, and hopefully I did get an email from a parent saying, thank you for bringing the fun back to Pelham. So that's one thing I'm feeling pretty good about.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions? Mr. Menino.
I just want to say the updates that you and Mike give are inspiring. I just wish you could film it and send us a video of what's going on in the school. I missed the school terribly. It's been almost 2 years, and it looks like it's going to be another semester or so before I can return. I miss the smiles on the kids' faces. That's all.
Yeah, they miss you too. The third grade definitely misses you.
I actually have a question. I don't really know what the intervention teacher does.
Mm-hmm. Do you want me to give you like a brief?
Yeah, just a brief.
Sure. So using the data that we've been collecting it for years. We can see that certain students struggle either in reading or math, and we can see where they're struggling. With reading, it's a little harder. The intervention teacher had to do some digger deeping and give a few other assessments to see why that student is struggling with reading. And then what we did was we looked at the class. We pulled the 2 or 3 kiddos that need a little additional support. She did those additional assessments. And then during our win block, which is whatever you need block, it's actually whatever I need, but whatever they need, she will pull them into a separate classroom because it's hard during COVID to do it in the classroom. That would be more ideal, but she'll find a separate space and she'll give them direct instruction in the areas where they have deficits. We're really excited that for reading in the last, I would say 3 years, we've learned a lot about reading and how to provide instruction that really helps reading. Is called phonological awareness, and it's all about the sounds that the letters make and being able to in your brain like play around with the sounds in different ways and take sounds out and add sounds, and just doing exercises in phonological awareness has really increased not only decoding reading, but also their fluency, how quickly they read. So she has seen just huge progress being able to give that kind of direct instruction to 2 or 3 kids 3 to 5 times a week. And the plan is to only do it for 6 to 8 weeks and see, test them at the end of the 6 to 8 weeks and see how they are, and then readjust. And sorry. And, either yes, what we're doing is working, or no, what we're doing is not working, and we need to reevaluate. And the big goal is to prevent these students from being referred to special ed, possibly unnecessarily.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful to understand. If there aren't any more questions, we'll move on. The chair is not here. She didn't send anything anything to report. Vice Chair doesn't have anything to report. So do any of the school committee members have any announcements to make? All right, then we're going to move right into our new and continuing business. And the first item is the superintendent goals. At our last meeting, Dr. Morris presented the goals and we talked about them a bit. They've come back tonight and I think it will possibly be for a vote to accept the goals after discussion. And as you can see, he's added the categories from the superintendent's rubric. The state has a way that you have to evaluate superintendents, and he's put a link at the top of this I saw tonight, which is great, so that if you want to know more about the rubric, you can look at that. So I guess I'll just open it up to Dr. Morris and any committee members who have questions or comments. Do you want to go first, Dr. Morris?
Yeah, I'll be very brief. I was able to integrate, as you noted, thank you, some of the standards and as well as the rubric. A couple minor changes, like including more longitudinal comparisons around staff of color. So it's not year by year, but the committees and the community would get a sense of kind of over the last 5 years and seeing how that's trending, because it is, it's a long-term goal for all of our districts, and I think looking at longitudinally made more sense. So I was able to integrate that in, and I think that's really the most significant change. I think it is, a couple of things in here about like math programming and some other things that we'll be updating the committee on over the next couple of months. But it's not a wildly different document than what you saw the last time.
Okay, thank you. So questions or comments from committee members? I'm not seeing any. So are people prepared to vote tonight to accept the? All right. Would someone like to make a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Menino. A second?
Second.
Thank you. We'll take a roll call vote. Ms. Kenny?
Kenny, I.
Mr. Menino?
Menino, I.
And Ms. Barlow?
Barlow, aye.
And Stancer, aye. The motion passes 4 in favor. All right. So we'll move on to the next item, which is the 6th grade to middle school conversation. We touched on this just briefly at the last meeting, and I think at this point I would turn it over to Dr. Morris.
Yeah, so I think my summary of the last meeting is, I made a recommendation perhaps not to rush this conversation in Pelham. There's not the same urgency. You don't have a building project. You don't have a space crunch in the same way the Amherst schools do. But I think the conversation was really helpful to me to hear the committee last time be able to talk through some of the, implications about what is the model, not at a necessarily just even at a broad level, but not even at a specific level, but at a broader level, like, if Pelham 6th graders went to the middle school, if the Pelham 6th grade teacher went to the middle school, that seems like it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I thought we'd come back this time and see if people agreed with me. First of all, just because it doesn't make sense to me doesn't mean it doesn't make sense to the committee. But really trying to think about if the Pelham community wanted to engage this question, that really, and it's a really different question than it is for my other elementary district in Amherst, because my recommendation, if you wanted to pursue it, would be pursuing it in conjunction with the Amherst Elementary District.
Yeah.
The benefits, the potential benefits anyway, of thinking about a 6th grade move for Pelham would have to be woven into having more than one teacher, kind of some level of middle school model. There's no way that Pelham could go without its counselor, for instance, just have, the 6th grade teacher up there and no mental health support, or, it would have to be a collaboration with the Amherst Public Schools, from my opinion. Where we are on planning is on curriculum day, I met with some of the 6th grade staff, regular ed, special ed, ELL, and some admin from the Amherst Public Schools. And we're meeting again after the holiday break. And really what we're trying to do, and I think I can bring this back to the Pelham committee, because I think it's probably the thing that is the next thing to dig in on, is sort of what are those critical buckets of work or questions that folks have. For instance, we know world language is going to be one. There's multiple models for world language. Could be exploratory model where every sixth grade student, receive 1 quarter in each of the 4 languages, makes a decision. For 7th grade, there's other 6th grade models where students make a decision on Spanish, Latin, Chinese, or French, and then go right into the language. There's a model question about, should there be 2 core teachers for a 6th grade team or 4 core teachers for a 6th grade team? And so, we had a really rich conversation on November 2nd. We're going to come back after the break and really try to delineate what are some key questions to consider. It's very Amherst-centric at this point, but I don't actually think that matters. I think they're core questions anytime any district's transitioning to a 6 to 8 middle school. And I think that's perhaps the time by which, at the next meeting, I'll be able to share that both with the Amherst School Committee and the Pelham School Committee. And I think that's probably where you're going to generate a lot of dialogue. At this point, it's still a little bit in the ether. We got to a pretty good place with a 1-hour meeting. We have an hour and a half scheduled the week after break, with the explicit purpose of having deliverables, not making decisions, actually, to be really clear, but identifying what are areas that we would want to get feedback on, and how are we going to get feedback from students, families, staff members in the community on these. And I think that'll drive the conversation that I sensed the committee wanting to have last month, because I think right now it's sort of this gelatinous item where, there's too many, you sort of have to structure some thoughts and some core questions. We're not quite there yet. We will be there in December. So, I think that the 2 things I had for tonight is, one, to make sure that I'm reading the room right, that if Pelham wanted to engage in it, it would be an integrated model with the Amherst Elementary District, and also to see if the committee would want me to come back in December or January with that list. It is being generated by Amherst folks, but I do think I don't think that's relevant in this case. I think it really is going to be, what educational models do we want? And again, it's a process piece. It's not a decision piece, but I think it'll generate a much better set of much better dialogue than where we are today. And I shared this with the Amherst School Committee last night as well. So those are the 2 things I had to generate dialogue, discussion, or thoughts from the committee tonight.
Thank you. Comments, questions? Mr. Menino.
Point of clarification, I think Margaret was well quoted in the Gazette article for the regional meeting what the position of Pelham was, but I'm not sure the Pelham parents were notified. What has been done to let the Pelham parents know that we haven't yet made a decision? How do the parents know what's going on? Because they read the newspaper, 6th grade moving to the middle school. Some of them assume it includes the outlying towns.
Yeah, so I think that we talked and we didn't get to resolution, but maybe putting something in the Pelham Press. And I think it was in the Pelham Press. So I think parents did get notified, but not everyone reads. I know from my newsletter, not everybody reads it. So perhaps we can continue, Ms. Starling, if that's okay, putting it in one more time. I find that repetition is not a terrible thing. But I know that it went in. If you're still hearing questions, that doesn't surprise me, because I know, we all get too many emails in life. And so, Ms. Starling, would that be okay to repeat putting that into the Pelham Press?
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Then, I'm not sure were you asking for our response right now to the movement of the 6th grade teacher to the middle school, or can we comment on that now, or should we wait?
I mean, I would love to make sure I'm reading the room right, that if Pelham is going to consider it, it's thinking about it, some level of collaboration.
Well, yeah, I have reservations about the whole thing, but to move the 6th grade teacher in the 6th grade class to the middle school and just have it taught the way it was taught at the Pelham school makes no sense. The idea is integration. I mean, if we move to the middle school, we should be part and parcel of the whole program. They should be next to an Amherst student. It shouldn't be isolated. I mean, you miss all the benefit of the potential move that way. That's all.
I just make one comment, which is we did at the regional meeting when we passed or approved moving the Amherst sixth graders to the middle school. We included, as was requested at our last meeting, to have something saying that Pelham could join at a later date, just to make sure that that was really clear. That if we decided not to go right away, we would still have the option later.
Well, I think your comments were well reported, but not everybody reads. I think it was in the last paragraph of the article in the Gazette where your comments were.
Right. Ms. Barlow.
Yes, I just wanted to say, if we do entertain this, certainly I think that integration is beneficial and how students can mostly benefit from the potential move. And another thing I wanted to raise, just to consider this, I'd love maybe to have a conversation or to learn more about the potential financial ramifications of moving the sixth grade. I think that because of our budget issues, although this year we've been pretty good, I just want to think about what the long-term budget issues might be, because I think that's going to be a part of the puzzle for us.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Morris?
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I have talked to Dr. Slaughter about this. I mean, candidly, it's a really different situation than the Amherst public schools, and we have some concerns about how to do cost sharing of shared staff that would be needed. And it's already going to be a little complicated between Amherst and region, but because Amherst comprises 80% of the region, it's a little bit easier to manage that. But when you're talking about 3% of a regional district, and you're talking about even something as simple as a nurse, which is obviously going to be shared staff. It's not going to be one class of Pelham kids with their own nurse. At the middle school, you're talking about 3%, but that all adds up for the overhead, whereas for the Amherst piece, it's just less relevant. So Dr. Slaughter and I do have financial concerns that unless the regional agreement was shifted and all the towns participated, which would be a different thing, we've got significant concerns about the financial impact on Pelham as well. So we could definitely come back to that, because I think I'm so glad you raised it, because I think it is a very real question.
Mr. Menino?
Just a clarification on the cost. Sixth grade students who are choice are not considered Pelham students for the purposes of budgeting, are they?
Sixth grade Pelham students,
they're not our students if they choose to go to the middle school. Sixth grade students who are
they
choice.
Would be in this scenario, because the sixth grade would still belong to and be governed by you all.
Oh.
So
that's different than now, right? Not when the sixth grade goes to the middle school. Okay.
Yeah, because when if you think of seventh grade now, they're not part of this district. So
okay,
but yeah, no, it's an awkward transition when we have a whole bunch of choice kids from all four of the elementary districts, and then the region inherits them as choice students, and it looks like our choice numbers go way up in seventh grade, but it's actually just an artifact of the flow of students. So,
and we would be informed of all these financial considerations before we vote for the move or after we vote for the move?
I think both, because depending on how the move would be structured, if it did happen, it would affect the finances. In other words, you could imagine multiple models that have different financial implications for it. But it is a complicated set of variables for Pelham to do. Not just I think the education part, frankly, is easier. I'm not saying it's good, bad, whatever, but that's easier to figure out. The financial part would be a real challenge for Pelham.
Mm. Anyone else have questions? Ms. Kenny.
I have the same two questions. What would the program look like? I think just moving our sixth grade as is to the middle school doesn't really offer much benefits. I think having our sixth graders where they are. They are a huge benefit in our school and they're fantastic. And so just to move them to a different place when we're not having space issues seems like a silly choice to me. So I would be interested in the program more if it were what the integration would look like and how that would work out. And I, same. I would definitely want to know how the money piece would all come together and unfold. I think that would be a really important part because it would make our decisions, that would be a whole school decision, not just about how things will affect the sixth grade. So.
Mr. Menino.
One of my comments I've been asking for 3 years is I guess it makes sense to have some of these things decided before you seek the response of parents. But what do the Pelham parents think? Are they for this? Are they against this? I don't know. I can't. My daughter's 37 years old. I don't know. My position on moving to the sixth grade is not involved. And if I've got a kid, what do I think about it? So we will hear from the Pelham parents before we make a decision, won't we?
I would not advise you making a decision before you have broad input from not just the Pelham families, but Pelham staff and Pelham students as well.
I'll just keep making this comment every meeting, though, just in case.
Great. Anyone else? The other thing, Ms. Barlow.
Yes, I think it's so important to get feedback from all of the constituents of Pelham, but if it's not financially feasible, I think it's important to look at the money because we are so vulnerable in a way. And if it's not financially feasible, I don't know that how far down the road we want to get with it. Although, I think, again, the educational opportunities are really exciting to me, but, and I know we won't 100% know what the financial ramifications are, but to get a snapshot from Dr. Slaughter sooner than later, I think would be really helpful.
I think you're right. And I do think, I think that's spot on. I fully agree with that because I'm not sure, I'm not going to use the word feasible because anything's feasible. It's just what your priorities are, right? But I'm not sure it'd be financially advisable from my perspective to take this on if it added almost any additional cost.
Yes.
Just given the, I know we're in better shape now, but 1-2 students going elsewhere could change that, right? And I've been through this cycle multiple times of feeling like we're okay and we're not okay, feeling like we're not okay, and we skate by. But it's we're not out of the woods. It's just we're in a better place, which is great. So I think that's a point really well taken. It's something I can talk to Dr. Slaughter about thinking about. I think it's sort of we have to get somewhere down on the line on model before we can do the cost. But the per pupil cost in Pelham is less than it is in Amherst. So there's all sorts of some complex negotiations, and sometimes our towns do that well. Sometimes we'll see about 4-town meeting on Saturday and how that goes, but for a different district. But I think your point's well taken that I think if we're seeing financial roadblocks, it may not be worth going too far forward at this point. It may be that a couple years down the road we are, but I think I agree with your sentiment that if we get the sense that there's going to be a significant added cost, I don't see Pelham in the place where we want to add costs for anything other than directly related to the students at Pelham School. That's my viewpoint anyway.
So the other item you mentioned, Dr. Morris, was coming back to our next meeting with information from your next meeting with the sixth grade teachers. Is that something the committee would like to have happen? Yes. Okay, great. So that'll Ms. Kenny.
I think as many updates as we can have on this while it's in the program, figuring out phases, I think the better. And I think it gives the whole Pelham community more time to think and process and sit with how they feel or what's going to be important to them as this whole thing progresses.
Okay. So that, I guess that will go onto the agenda for next month again, for our next meeting. Okay, so the next item is preschool in fiscal year 23. And are we going to Dr. Morris or Miss Darling for that one?
I think I'll start and take this so Ms. Darling can jump in. I know this is a little early to have the conversation. It's before we start the budget process, but that's not by accident. As you know, we had a preschool program here for about 6, 7 years. And when the pandemic started, it was unclear whether we were going to be able to maintain that program because we didn't know if we would have school open, and virtual preschools are not seen to be as beneficial as perhaps some of the older grades. And so we stopped it. We did not have it this year. I want to thank Ms. Schlotty, who's I think Ms. Darling actually was referencing before in terms of taking on the intervention role this year and doing a fabulous job with that. Our former preschool teacher. And so when we look forward to next year, I have some real concerns about opening the preschool up. And there's kind of 3 or 4 of them. The first is that the significant amount of overhead to restart the program. That, when you have a stable group of students, some graduate up to kindergarten, some stay with you, that's a little bit easier. When you're transitioning a whole group of 18 or however many students it would be, to recruit, that comes with some challenges. The first is just the overhead, given all the things that we're managing, and particularly Principal Darling's managing very well, I might add, at Pelham School. The second piece is really about the cost. I'm happy that paraeducators and others got a pretty significant pay bump this year. That's a really good thing. What it would mean for our programming is that we would be, to come even, we'd be nearing $10 an hour for cost because our salary increases are a bit more than in the private market. That's not a knock on our salary increases. I think our staff members work incredibly hard. They deserve to have the salaries they have and probably then some. And so, but I think I am concerned, given the cost increases that we're seeing, that we're going to price ourselves out of the market. Because that'd be significantly more than just about any other private preschool in our area, with the exception of 1 or 2. The third concern I have about starting the program again really comes to space. While we don't have the space issues that Amherst has, I was at the school a couple hours ago, and I was seeing intervention groups in the art room, the music room. Music class is also using that art room, which was the preschool room. It's opened up the gym. A long time ago, before the preschool program started, the gym was used all the time for indoor recess, for movement breaks for kids, all these things that we got accustomed to not having. And so I do have some real concerns about that. That, you could argue that once you lose the space, once you gain the space, you use it, but I'm not seeing people just casually using the space. I'm seeing people using it to have small group instruction. I'm seeing it for students who are struggling to have a different space to do learning that Ms. Darling mentioned, some, early literacy skills, early math skills, and the movement skills are really important. And we want our kids up and moving because we know it helps them learn. So, I think we got used to being really tight on space, and now that we're less tight on space, what I see is instruction happening in ways that are working better for children. So, at this point, I'm not looking for a decision tonight, but at this point, my recommendation or initial recommendation would be to maintain our current K-6 program through put all of our resources in it. There is $9,000 left in the preschool revolving account and the preschool revolving fund. And so that doesn't need to go anywhere anytime soon. It's a little less than ideally we would have. You generally want to have about $20,000, about 20% of typical year, but it's okay. And we would just hold on to that. So in other words, we're not, I wouldn't be recommending a permanent decision, but at this point, given COVID, given what we're seeing about space and use of space in the building, and some real creativity on the part of Ms. Darling in terms of designing the, and reformatting the special ed and intervention group differently than how it was formulated in the past rather. That's really working for kids. I'd be inclined to maintain our level of programming and really focus our energy in a really, like I mentioned before, it is an exhausting experience running a school during COVID. And for Ms. Darling to jump into this, kudos to you. I think I said this at the high school graduation about Mr. Sadiq as well. It takes a special person to jump into a school leadership role mid-pandemic. Not an easy thing to do. But, the reality is I think there's enough to focus on at our K-6 environment. And my last point is that, originally this was designed to increase the choice numbers in the school. What we experienced this year is that our choice numbers got back to where we needed them to be without having a preschool program that was a feeder program. So, for me, that's the way I'm leaning. When not asking for a decision tonight, we come back maybe in December because it'd be helpful to have that decision before the budget process kicks off in earnest. But that's sort of where I am at the moment. Ms. Darling, you don't have to add anything. I don't know if there's other wrinkles that I'm missing that you'd like to add.
The only thing that I could add is I agree with a lot of the points you just made. And I remember, before the pandemic, when the preschool was there and I was a teacher, there was constantly an absence of a teacher in the preschool program, which we had to fill. Legally, we had to put another person in there. So that meant pulling a teacher from the K-6 staff, which isn't always ideal. And it was constant. So that's the only thing that my experience.
Any questions from committee members? Comments? Mr. Menino?
Not commenting now does not in any way, shape, or form making us a comment later. I mean, if we're silent now, we can speak up later.
Dr. Morris? Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. No, I just, there was no memo attached. I apologize for this one. But I just at least wanted to share my thoughts.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
No, other than Mike has a issue that he has not had in previous meetings.
Excitable kids. I probably should have done this meeting from the office, but I chose not to, and I'm regretting it, but that's okay.
All right. So we'll move on to the next item, which is vaccines for students 5 to 11 years old. And Dr. Morris again.
Yeah, so, great news a couple weeks ago that vaccines at this age level, the elementary age level, were approved. We had some vaccine clinics. The town of Amherst ran, they got 150 doses, or they actually titrated it really well. So we ended up getting 152 doses out of it. And we ran school-based clinics last week at Fort River Wildwood and Crocker Farm. And they really had an equity focus. So the number of students who attended, there was a tremendous amount of outreach that went on, really looking at students and families who had access barriers to receiving the vaccine. Fortunately, this vaccine is not like last March and April, where there were no appointments and people were waking up at 3 a.m. to get their appointments. Frankly, there's appointments readily available, both pediatricians' offices, CVS, Walgreens, Big Y, there's been some state sites that have been set up, UMass. I was at UMass for my own child last week, but also in Springfield, I know there were sites like right away that had openings. So, I did talk to Principal Darling, who identified a few students who might benefit from having a school-based clinic. Fort River is not very far. It's not very far down the road. At that point, those families indicated that they either already had appointments elsewhere or were, not interested in having the vaccine for their child at this time. So we did not have Pelham students participate, but I think it is worth noting that if there were students who had those access barriers, we had an alternative for them. We are running another clinic next Tuesday night, Tuesday afternoon. It's 3 to 5:30. It's located at the high school. It's through the state-run clinic, so it's not the town of Amherst clinic. It's the state-run clinic, and there are still pediatric vacancies as well as adult vacancies. We had a lot of adults sign up for boosters. first shot, second shot. It seems likely that boosters are going to be available for everybody, every adult over 18, probably within a couple days. So that may get more interest in that as well. And 3 weeks later, there'll be a second shot, same time, same location. The data that we get from the state puts Amherst and Pelham together because it's by zip code. But the data was promising in the first 4 days that they were available. 18% of children 5 to 11 in the town of Amherst and Pelham already had their first shot. That number would be higher because our last clinic was the day after in Amherst, and there was 52 kids that got vaccinated that day. So as well as UMass had their clinic. I know there was a Pelham family I saw when I was literally there for my own child, just someone I knew who was there. So between the Fort River clinic and the UMass clinic, I know our numbers probably, my guess would have doubled if they included that last day. So I think there has been broad interest in Pelham families. We're trying to make it as accessible as possible. At that high school clinic, we emailed out that information in the newsletter Friday and put a reminder in by email to all families on Monday. And we'll keep on seeing what we can do to support families to access that resource. What we know is that we're safer. Vaccines are much more effective at the community level than the individual level. So while it helps protect you or anyone who gets a vaccine, the most important thing is that the community has wide vaccination coverage right now. If you look at our numbers in Amherst and Pelham at the 12 to 15-year-old level, for instance, we're at 89% vaccinated, which is fantastic. And so I think these are communities that, I'm sorry, I don't have Pelham specific numbers because they don't break it out that way. It's by zip code. But I think we are seeing these are numbers that are favorable, and I think there's been a lot of interest. I know I talked to Principal Darling, and she's hearing just anecdotally, parents picking up their children for vaccine shots. If they got them at CVS or in a principal's office in the middle of the day, and bring their kids back. So far what we've heard anecdotally is and it's in the clinical data as well, that the side effects have been much more mild than old folks like us on this call. And that's a good thing, so that we're not having kids miss school the same way sometimes adults need to miss work because of the side effects. So far so good. We'll keep on figuring out what the needs of the community are, but I think it is something that we're really excited about, and it's going to make our schools safer. I will tell you anecdotally as well, it's a really different feeling at the middle school, high school. It's not that there aren't positive cases at the middle school, high school, there are, but because our vaccination coverage, both of the staff and students, is so high, I wouldn't say it's relaxed, but it is less intense when you have schools that are well above 80% vaccinated, whereas at Pelham formerly, if you think of all the students, maybe there's a couple sixth graders who snuck in there based on their birth date. But this will, I think, make our school safer at a pretty critical time, because we're seeing trends, negative trending in Massachusetts and the Northeast right now with the colder weather and the holiday season. I think that's likely to continue. The case counts are going up. Fortunately, hospitalization and some other critical numbers are not going up at the same level, but today's number was the highest I've seen in months, of new cases, 2,600 new cases. So, we're seeing what maybe our healthcare professionals were suggesting was likely to happen post-Halloween, more inside time. And so critical time for us all to take this vaccination opportunity really seriously in the school, and we'll continue to provide resources and support for families to get vaccinated, for the children to get vaccinated. So that's my update there. Ms. Darling, anything I'm missing on that one?
Thank you.
Okay.
Questions or comments? Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Morris. That's the end of our new and continuing business. There are 2 warrants, and I will read them in Sarah's place. Sarah Hall, authorized by her signature to payables in the amount of $58,887.96 for payroll dated 8/25/21. And Sarah Hall authorized by her signature to payables in the amount of $62,907.45 for payroll, and that was dated 11/3/21. So we have no gifts, so that leads us to adjourn. But I need a motion. Would somebody like to make one?
So moved.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Menino. I'll second that. We'll take a roll call vote. Miss Kenny,
Kenny, I.
Miss Barlow,
Barlow, aye.
Miss Darling. Now you don't have to say anything. Mr. Menino
Menino, aye.
and Stancer, aye. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
See you next time.
See you next
Good night.
month.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.